a heck of a lot happened in Mexico City this past weekend. So much that even though the TV direction continues to improve, it was difficult to keep track of the slightly chaotic sequence of events as they unfolded, and it was only after the race finished that I really could unpick exactly what went on in the first corner. And I realised that once again, Fernando Alonso was the first domino for one of the incidents. Sweetie. But while it was a fun, exciting Grand Prix, were there any real conclusions to draw from it? Kia ora, I'm Kimmy, I talk F1 in the world's second worst accent, and these are my 3 conclusions from the 2025 Mexico City Grand Prix. Off the bat, I'm going to say I won't be discussing the booing, the scary incident involving Liam Lawson coming across marshals on track, or doing a deep dive piece of investigative journalism to uncover the person with an Etsy witch on retainer specifically to curse the Spaniards. No, today we're kicking it off with something positive. Rookies. Now, while your definition of a rookie is going to vary depending on whether you consider the title anything to do with having driven a full season start to finish with all the prep work involved during the winter, is a matter of personal opinion. For my definition here, I'm going for those guys who had only ever done FP1 sessions before Melbourne, plus Ollie Bearman, whose cameos in Saudi, Baku and Brazil involved babysitting another guy's car. I think that now that we're most of the way through the season, it's pretty clear that this year's sizable crop of new kids on the track has held their own brilliantly against their teammates and the rest of the grid, and shown that this wasn't a matter of cramming a bunch of kids into a mud-filled funnel and hoping 1 or 2 of them would drop out the other end. At times, as more and more newcomers were confirmed for seats during last year's silly season, it felt like a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the complete absence of them at all at the beginning of 2024. Bearman and Antonelli weren't performing as well as expected in F2, Hadjar was seen as a bit too much of a hothead, and Bortoleto wasn't given the credit by many for his consistency that nabbed him the title. Some people instead like to focus on the fact that he only got 2 wins over the course of the entire year, fewer than 12th place Bearman, which is an excellent example of statistical cherry-picking when Bortoleto's wins were both feature races and Bearman's were all sprints that he started from within the top 3 thanks to the reverse grid format. And even though all of them have had their fair share of silly incidents, and Ollie Bearman's narrowly escaped a race ban, albeit in part thanks to what I still consider an unreasonable red flag offence in Monaco, they've all shown that they're quick, they're unafraid of going wheel to wheel, and they have immense capacity to learn and develop and often show up their far more experienced teammates. Only Antonelli hasn't been regularly out-qualifying the guy on the other side of the garage, and you have to cut the guy a little bit of slack because George Russell is arguably performing at a consistently higher level than the 2 guys at the top of the championship right now. Controversial take, I know, don't cancel me for it, Oscar and Lando fans. As I've said in the past, I am certainly not a George fan, but I have to give the guy some credit. He's been excellent this year. Now, these rookies, and Bearman in particular, have proven that you don't need to set F2 on fire to be the right kind of driver for Formula 1. This is surely a serious consideration for Red Bull and their final decision on whether or not to promote Arvid Lindblad. My second conclusion is that Mexico was finally the example we all needed that skipping a step in the tyre compounds is a great way to promote more interesting strategic options when the right circuit is chosen. Now initially, I'll admit I wasn't so sure about the choice to stick with the C4 and the C5 for the medium and soft and go 1 step harder to the C2 for the white wall tyre. I thought that maybe moving a step softer to the C5 and the C6 might have made things really interesting. And I do think that going in this direction for Austin would have been better, but in Mexico the C2 proved to be so unfavoured that only 2 cars took the risk to use it in the race at all, and this, combined with the high track temperatures, is what created such a strategically interesting Grand Prix, with tyre offsets up and down the grid that led to some really great overtaking and nail-biting defensive stints. This was the complete opposite to 2024, where only 3 cars used the soft at all. Perez and Leclerc for a fastest lap attempt, and Lawson as a consequence of damaging his front wing in a clash with Colapinto. Previously, the compound skip was in action at Spa and Austin, and neither of those really mixed up the strategy much. Not at all, actually. Spa because the race started on intermediates and thus negated the need to use 2 dry compounds at all, and Austin thanks to its low deck. In hindsight, Spa probably isn't the right race to test this kind of thing out at due to its chaotic weather, which to be honest I was saying when they said that they were going to do it there at all, and Austin probably should have had a step softer in the range for the medium and soft tyres and kept the C2 as the hard rather than moving to the C1. But that's all learning, and hopefully next year Pirelli will find the right balance between which tracks and which compounds to pick if they decide to continue with this approach. I really hope they do, because I just think it's fun. Now I know there's a bunch of purists out there who see this sort of thing as fakery that manipulates race outcomes, but I put this to you. Would you also be complaining about a boring processional race where nobody took any strategic risks that finished with everyone in the same position they finished lap 1 in? Wouldn't you rather watch an exciting, engaging event where, without an unfortunately timed VSC, multiple drivers would have been going for an overtake on the very last lap? And more importantly, crucial championship points on the very last lap. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And at the end of the day, all rules are constructs anyway, and personally I fully support this one. But then I am biased because I've been talking about doing this for years, and having one's opinion validated is always deeply satisfying. Finally, this race was a stark reminder that even when the stewarding decisions are correct, there will always be fan bases who say they aren't and will pick and choose when they want drivers to be allowed to race and when they'd prefer everything were prescriptively ruled on depending on whether or not it favours their guy. Now I too was incredibly disappointed that Lewis Hamilton was penalised into oblivion for his lawn mowing incident. I also was desperately hoping he could get that darn podium. But I'm sorry, that was a slam dunk penalty. And yes, it was an unfortunate sequence of events that meant it wasn't really feasible to give back the place. But the reality is, he locked up, he went off the track, he emerged ahead, and he kept the position. That is the risk that you take when going for an overtake on a notoriously dirty track where you have 3 other cars right up your trumpet. Now the difference between this incident and the lap 1 turn 1 chaos is that both Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen had the opportunity to immediately get back into position after cutting the corner, which they did in the most part. You could argue that Charles should also have dropped back behind Lewis as well, which I totally agree with, but that's more of an intra-team politics thing and not something that the stewards are generally going to get involved in. Max also likely would have made the corner if all 4 of his tyres had been in contact with the road, rather than half of them on the curb and the AstroTurf as he got squeezed. This is just the nature of this circuit. It's the longest run into the first corner on the calendar, and it's almost impossible for every car to make it through without at least a few of them needing to bail out at the last minute. Well, that's just racing. And unfortunately for Lewis, he was just really unlucky that by the time he re-emerged onto the track after his battle with Max had lost position to Ollie Behrman, and Lewis handing back the place would have meant dropping back 2 spots and possibly even risk losing a heck of a lot more if he didn't judge it perfectly due to how tightly bunched up everyone was at that point of the Grand Prix. Now I'm kind of always in this sort of push-pull relationship with the internet at large, and especially in Formula One spaces. Yes, I choose to do this, and while I have this channel because I adore this sport and I love talking about it, I also admit that sometimes from an anthropological standpoint, I'm often, when I can bring myself to do it anyway, studying the comment sections of various websites like the faceless keyboard warriors of bugs in a jar. Why? Because the bad takes can make for really good content, and the good takes can really get the mind tank bubbling away, and that can lead to a breakthrough in how you view certain things. And as much as this channel supplements my beer budget and not much else, I still treat it as a job, and that means hitting the read more and being exposed to some of the most ill-informed biased takes I've seen, just to make sure I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and I'm aware of what sort of opinions exist out there in the wild. And I'm always kind of slapped in the face by the fact that every fandom is the same. Whether it's fictional media or gaming or sports or music or whatever, the stands are always out there moving the goalposts to fit their agenda, and the antis are always right there to reply with something inflammatory and usually pretty gross, or vice versa. So while I continue to be a champion for professional stewarding and a less prescriptive set of driving standards and racing guidelines that leave room for nuanced decisions made by people paid to study, develop, and rule on them full time, I also accept that fandoms will always just be fandoms. They will have bad actors or just those who let their emotion cloud their ability to be objective. And I'm also grateful to past me for limiting discourse access by deactivating their Twitter account. So that's it. That's my 3 conclusions from the 2025 Mexico City Grand Prix. What are yours? Chat about them down in the comments. Give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more from me. Thanks as always to my patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to help fill my fridge as well as get access to ad-free videos and my full season session tracker self-calculating spreadsheet, the link is down in the description as well as right here on the screen. Ka kite, I'll catch you next time.